planned retirement of SMS and voice for MFA options by VITA, since SMS and voice are generally viewed as less secure options. At that point, Cardinal encouraged our user community to install Okta Verify, which is a smartphone app. We've had over 15,000 non-COV users do that. But at the same time, after those communications, we received significant feedback, both from users and through escalations. Some of that feedback came from users who had older smartphones. Some of those feedback came from users who did not have smartphones. And some people expressed privacy concerns and other concerns about using their personal smartphone to install an application to get into Cardinal. Because of all that, we worked closely with Luis and the VITA Okta team and got more time, and also developed alternative to smartphone-based MFA options, which we're going to go over today. However, we are still now about a month away for the current deadline for when SMS and voice will be retired by VITA/Okta. So today, we're going to demonstrate these options. Our communications and training team are updating job aids and other working documents for users. And then very soon, there will be communications to the user group, as well as Cardinal message board updates to get as many users transitioned off of SMS and voice by early April. We're going to talk about Okta FastPass today as our recommended desktop-based solution. But as we go through that discussion, for those on the phone who are IT directors or ISOs, etc., this is a desktop-based application that your organization will decide if you want to roll out to your entire user community or potentially a subset of users, the users who do not have access to smartphones. Because, of course, VITA nor Cardinal can control or have anything to do with your desktop image. So we'll talk more about that later. Are there any questions so far? And we are recording, correct? Okay. This table describes the solutions that we're going to talk about today. There are a few things a little bit subjective on it, but I'm going to go kind of top down. I meant to say this earlier, we will be sending out a link to this deck at some point following this call, so you all have this. Okay. So again, top down, Okta Verify. Okta Verify, as we said before, is a smartphone-based application that works on both iOS and Android phones. It does require a minimum iOS 17.0 and Android 13. There have been some users who have older versions who have not been able to install it, which we understand through tickets. The second line item is Google Authenticator. Google Authenticator is also a smartphone-based application. It does support slightly older versions of the various operating systems. The third line. This is where it gets a touch confusing. When users select their MFA options within their profile, a user can select Google Authenticator. However, that allows basically any authenticator app that allows a barcode to be scanned, a QR code to be scanned, such as Duo, such as Microsoft Authenticator, such as Rapid Identity, to be used. Our understanding is a number of universities use Duo. We believe that VCCS, at least a good chunk of VCS people, use Rapid Identity. Those will work, but they will look like you're setting up Google Authenticator when you're setting that up within the Okta console. But we would assume that some users who are familiar with these other apps might be more comfortable with that and also may not want to put another app such as Okta Verify on their smartphone. Okta FastPass, again, is a desktop version. The last two rows here are coming soon. We've got to migrate some changes in, which we'll talk about in a second, for Cardinal to allow them to work for the Cardinal logins. We are targeting the weekend of March 7th and March 8th to migrate those changes to production. Today, we're going to do demonstrations of them in one of our non-production environments. Again, the general target audience for Okta FastPass is probably people who do not have access to a smartphone or prefer not to use for an organization that is willing and able to deploy Okta FastPass. UB keys and security keys. So again, a UB key we'll talk about later, right? A physical hardware key is also an option after March 7th, March 8th. But there are some complexity and limitations, which is why we are strongly recommending FastPass over UB keys for users who do not have smartphone access. It's a lot on this slide, but there's even more down at the link that you're going to get in this deck that ties back to the VITA page related to authentication services. Any questions at this point? Okay, again, this is a preview for this audience of our leadership contacts, but users will be getting communications as well, because there are two minor look and feel differences coming to the Cardinal sign-in page while we enable FastPass and UB keys to work. It's important to note that these changes are just for the desktop-based logins. That's 90% of our user base goes to Cardinal from a desktop. There will be no changes to mobile logins. About 10% of our user base accesses Cardinal from a browser on a mobile phone. Okay. The first change, as you're seeing on these screenshots, when you go to Cardinal today, the username and password field is present right when you go to the Cardinal login page. And users would then enter their username, Cardinal username, and their password, hit sign in, and then the MFA screen would come up, assuming they're off network, which is 95% of the case for non-COV. Disregard the blue bird versus the red bird. That signals to us this is a non-production environment. But in the new model, once we migrate this to production, when a user first goes into the Cardinal login screen, just their username will be present, will have a field. They'll click next and enter their password. So pretty minor, but again, we will be sending out comms. We will be updating the message board because we want to make sure the users know this change is expected. Because in this day and age, any changes, users might wonder why they're being changed, and we might get tickets. The second minor change is for MFA itself. Effectively today, if a user has multiple MFA options, they can be selected in a drop-down mode. So for instance, they basically, in this case, could select Okta Verify or Google Authenticator. For the purpose of this demonstration, I still have SMS or text configured. In the future, they're going to look like kind of like a radio buttons instead. So again, the left is how it looks today. The right is how it will look tomorrow. Only for desktop applications, not for mobile. Okay, we're now switching to the demonstration part of this session. This is scheduled, the whole thing's scheduled for 90 minutes. I believe will be done by around 3:30 or 3:45 in the demonstration piece, and we'll then be able to take questions from this group. And we expect that a lot of the questions will be the same. So again, as you have questions, please enter them in the chat or keep them to the end. When we do the demonstrations coming up, I am going to toggle back from sharing my screen to my desktop screen, which I'm sharing now, to also sharing the screen from my iPhone to best help the group see the experience with the smartphone apps. It will take a little bit to toggle back and forth, but we thought it was worth it to get the full user lifecycle. Okay. So again, Okta Verify, smartphone app built by Okta to support MFA. Because this is a modern, secure app with frequent updates, there are older models of iPhones and Androids will not support. We just talked about that earlier. Okay. This is the application that the Cardinal Help Desk staff, which is basically the first line of defense for non-COV users, is most familiar with. Okay. This is why back in late October, early September, this was our recommended and remains our recommended solution for smartphones. Okay. At the site below, and again, you will get this in your, when you see this deck, there are detailed instructions on our website as to how Okta Verify can be installed. Okay. I'm going to get out of the PowerPoint mode now, and I'm going to show how Okta Verify can be set up and used in our non-prod environment. And again, this is available today, but I'm going to do this in non-prod just the same. So first of all, I'm going to log into the virginia.okta.com site with my ID that we're going to use throughout this presentation today. I already still have SMS configured for the purpose of this demonstration, so I've got to enter an SMS code. Bear with me. And again, we're not expecting you to, for those of you who are looking right now, we're not expecting you to be taking notes into how to set this up. That will come in the job aids and whatnot that are being updated and are available at the website that I just mentioned. But again, the user will go to basically set up their MFA options, and they will pick Okta Verify. Okta Verify. This isn't that different for Google Authenticator that we'll look in a couple minutes. But for Okta Verify, I'm hitting setup. I'm going to have to re-authenticate one additional time. I'm going to have to do MFA one more time with our SMS at this point. Okta Verify is an authenticator app. Yes, it is, installed in your phone or computer. So right now I'm setting up the mobile version of it. Okay. So these QR codes, now I'm going to switch over to my phone. Bear with me for a second. Okay, so again, now you're seeing my phone. Okay, so I've already downloaded Okta Verify, which is the first step within the first step that is in our instruction guide, just to make sure from the Apple Store App Store that Okta Verify is downloaded. So now I'm going to scan that barcode by adding an account. And again, these instructions are in our job aids. And it's going to say, yes, where do I get my QR code? Well, it's in front of me on my laptop. Okta Verify does require Face ID or password confirmation. I'm going to enable. And in this case, I'm going to set as default. And I have now configured Okta Verify on my smartphone as my MFA factor. I'm now going to switch back to my, I'm going to now share again from my desktop. I'm going to go off video because you guys don't need to see me anymore doing that. Okay. So you guys can now see my screen again. Previously, I just had SMS set up. Now Okta Verify is set up. Okay. So now I'm going to go into using Okta Verify to get into Cardinal. So I'm going to go to my non-production site. We call our mirror environment a mirror of production. Okay. And again, we're going to log in. And MFA is going to be prompted. And Okta Verify, there are two different modes to Okta Verify. I can either push a notification or I can do a one-time password. In this case, I did a push notification. I'm not going to show you my screen again, but I am going to click Yes, It's Me on my iPhone. And basically behind the scenes, as you're seeing on my screen, I have validated myself using Okta Verify, and I'm into Cardinal. Again, Okta Verify is our preferred recommended smartphone solution, but there are others which we'll go to next. Any questions in the chat that we need to talk about?
So with the elimination of SMS and or telephone, what are the options for two-factor recovery? Upgrading the phones doesn't always copy these settings.
Repeat that question.
With the elimination of SMS and or telephone, what are the options for two-factor authentication recovery?
Yeah, so if a user needs to have MFA factors reset, they will need to enter a ticket to the Cardinal, to VCC with Cardinal in the subject, and our help desk team can reset MFA factors. That happens today already. It will happen more tomorrow, we do fear. But in today, if someone has we get tickets all the time where someone is using one phone number, okay, and they actually switch their phone numbers. In that case, they create a ticket and we reset their MFA factors and they're able to enroll essentially the new cell phone number. And that will be what will happen in the future if they switch cell phones and they're not able to carry over their configuration.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions at the moment? I'm going to go back to PowerPoint for a second. Again, I am going to reiterate that our help desk staff is much better positioned to help with Okta Verify. However, there are other options, right? So, and we know, again, for universities and VCCS, Duo and Rapid Identity may be used for other purposes. So we are putting those out there as options, right? So we're going to first talk about Google Authenticator, and then we're going to talk about the one-time based applications. Again, Cardinal Help Desk staff, we're going to try our best, okay? If someone has to enter a timesheet or someone needs to open enrollment and is trying to use Duo, we will try our best, okay? But this is not the exhausted list of applications out there. Any authenticator app effectively that can scan a QR code, there's many more than these four can be used, and we don't have the ability to know the nuances of every single one of those, okay? But in general, we're going to first do Google Authenticator, but the steps to set up Duo and Rapid Identity or Microsoft Authenticator are identical to Google Authenticator, okay? So I'm going to go back, and now we're going to go back to where in the console where we're setting up factors, okay? And at this point, I have my phone set up and I have Okta Verify set up. I'm now going to choose Google Authenticator, okay? And I'm actually going to set up Google Authenticator in this case. So I'm going to hit Setup. Every time you add MFA factors or remove them, you're going to have to re-authenticate. I can either verify with SMS. I'm going to do Okta Verify this time. Immediately on my phone, I get Is it me that's trying to sign in? Yes, it is. Okay. Now it says, let's set up Google Authenticator. Okay, well, I'm going to switch now. I'm going to hit setup. And now I'm going to go back and share my screen on my iPhone again. Bear with me. Great. Okay, so you're seeing my iPhone again. I've already downloaded Google Authenticator from the App Store. I've removed my normal accounts here because I wanted to be fresh for doing this. I'm going to hit add a code. I'm going to hit scan a QR code. And it scanned it really quickly. And you see the number 638223. Okay, so that's going to change as time goes on quickly. It changes, I think, every 10 seconds or something like this. So I'm going to now switch back to my, I'm going to share now my desktop again. Okay. So now you're going to trust that I'm entering the right number now. So on my phone, it says 539545. And I'm going to hit, missed a step there, didn't I? I need to actually log into Cardinal. Sorry. Let me go back. We're going to log into Cardinal instead. Sorry about that. So give me 1 second. Again, so what we're doing right now is going into demonstrate how we can use Google Authenticator to get into Cardinal. So I'm going to my login screen. I'm going to verify with something else. I really like Google Authenticator now, so I'm going to go and select Google Authenticator. And I'm going to enter my current passcode that's on my iPhone. And I get into our non-prod mirror environment. Okay, so again, the install process for Google Authenticator is very similar to Okta Verify, other than it does not require facial recognition. Any questions in the chat we need to talk about at this point? Okay, I'm going to go back to PowerPoint for 1 second.
Hey,
Now
Rob.
we're going to talk about Duo, Microsoft, and Rapid Identity. I'm not going through all three of them. They are effectively identical setup processes. But I am going to demonstrate Duo. Okay. So on my iPhone, I've already downloaded, I have all these apps downloaded. Let's go look at what shows up. So right now, Google Authenticator, remember I just set up Google Authenticator. So it, like Okta recognizes that I have Google Authenticator set up. If I want to use Duo or I want to use Rapid Identity, I have to remove what I've set up so far. Okay. So I'm going to go and remove it. Do I want to remove it? Yes. Again, I got to do credentials every time I do this. I'm going to verify with something else. In this case, I'm going to do Okta Verify push. Okay. So again, not very intuitive, but if I'm setting up any of these other authenticators, I've got to set up select Google Authenticator. Okay. So I'm going to select Google Authenticator. The same thing that we saw before. I'm going to have to enter my password. I'm going to have to validate myself. Oh, is that okay? Okay. So again, I'm doing Duo now, but I've got to set up, it looks like I'm setting up Google Authenticator. I'm clicking setup. I'm now going to go one more last time. This is the last time we'll go back to my phone. Okay, so now let's just take. I'm a VCU person at this point. I think based on some tickets we received, that I think VCU, at least parts of VCU, uses Duo. So I'm probably already pretty familiar with Duo. Okay, now I wiped out all my accounts to begin with today, but I've already installed Duo. Probably if you're a VCU person, you already have an account there that ties back to whatever solution at VCU you're using Duo for. But I'm going to hit continue. I'm going to hit use a QR code, and I'm going to scan. And notice that it comes up. It knows it's Okta, third party, and it knows my account name is at virginia.gov. I am saving that. I'm clicking next. And then I am entering on
your desktop.
On my desktop, I'm entering the passcode to set it up. Okay. So I know you didn't see that on my desktop, but effectively I have now set up Duo for my authentication option. Now I'm going to go back to my desktop, and we're going to stay in the desktop from this point forward. Okay, a couple things to point out here. Again, while I set up Duo, it's going to show it's listed under Google Authenticator. That also means that the Cardinal help desk staff never even sees the word Duo. Okay, so that's another reason why it's a bit of a challenge for us. So we're just going to see it as Google Authenticator and know it probably is Google Authenticator, but it could be Duo, it could be Rapid Identity, it could be another authentication app we never heard of. Okay, so that's the other challenge there. But again, if users are already familiar with it, it's not that difficult of a setup. Okay, so now we'll just demonstrate. Now I'm going to go into my mirror environment one more time. Okay, so now it says Google Authenticator, but I'm really, right, so I know that really means I'm using Duo. So I'm going in, and on my Duo screen, that's the number presented. And I'm able to get into Cardinal. All of these, I'm going to go back to the table for a second. So the three things we've just been talking about, Okta Verify, Google Authenticator, and the time-based one-time passwords, they all work today with Cardinal. So that's why there are already users out there who are probably noticed that they can get Duo to work and Rapid Identity work, etc. And we actually don't see that on our side. We just see it as Google Authenticator. So all three of those currently work. But we're about to shift to FastPass, again, our recommended non-smartphone solution. And then we're going to talk a little bit about YubiKeys. These are the ones that are coming soon. Any questions about the smartphone apps prior to us moving on? And Luis, thank you for continuing to respond to stuff. Really appreciate it. I am not looking at the chat myself at this point.
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah, no worries.
Yep. Was there a question?
Yeah, Ryan, this is Phil Napier. Just a quick question about the apps. I know the last time I went through this with some users, they were surprised because they might not have had facial recognition set up on their phone. Is the current process for the Okta application that it will require them to set that up on their phone as part of the Okta install?
Yeah, Okta Verif. This is Rogers. Ryan is presenting, but hey, Phil. Okta Verify, keep me honest here, Luis, does require facial recognition or entering a passcode, like your passcode for your iPhone. The authenticator apps generally do not. Luis, did I
Correct.
answer that
So
correctly?
the depends on your device as well, right? So it's a different biometric options will appear depending on the device. iPhones on the newer releases only use facial recognition. They don't use fingerprints anymore. So that is a limitation on the iPhone side, but we do require it as a validation because we want to ensure that if your device gets stolen, that factor is not compromised essentially, right? Alternatively, I believe there's an option where you can go after you've done the initial registration. There is a PIN option as well that can be managed, but it also often is determined on if that device itself is being managed centrally, right? If it's a work issue device, MDM does come into that role and it could complicate some of the options, but technically that is an option for PIN instead. But I believe
That's fine.
upon initial enrollment, you will have to do BIOS at first.
That's consistent with what I've seen, which is you install the Okta app and it forces you to set up facial recognition as part of the install. It doesn't, even if you've never set up facial recognition and only use the PIN, it forces you to do that as part of the install. You can go back later in the config of it and just use a PIN.
Correct.
But
Yep.
during the install, there's no escape button. And that sometimes causes users a little bit of confusion. But thank you for verifying that. That's consistent with what I've seen. And from y'all's perspective, they got to have the functionality for the PIN or the ID and that or facial recognition. That makes perfect sense. Got it.
And that was, I mean, again, going back to early November, that was some of the concerns raised in tickets that came into us related to Okta Verify. And again, some of this was privacy concerns or things along those lines. So again, we're about to talk about Okta FastPass, which again was not available earlier, will be available come March 7th and March 8th. So I'm going to go there next. Okay, so again, we recognized in that early November timeframe, based on user tickets and based on escalations, that there is a subset of our user group who just either does not have current smartphones, do not have any smartphones, or express concerns, right? So that's why things got extended, and we've been working really hard behind the scenes on what should sound like an easy, not that complex solution, but really is fairly complex. But we found we are now soon going to, in the production environment, as I mentioned, migrating this in to allow Okta FastPass to work. Again, it's a little confusing, but we call it Okta FastPass, but it actually shows up as Okta Verify on the desktop. But it is commonly referred to FastPass. Okay. Again, the key message for the IT folks on this call is, if you choose to go with Okta FastPass, either if you want to roll it out entirely to your organization, or if you want to roll it out to those subset of users who can't use or won't use smartphones, we can guide you. And Luis was the person organized with the rollout of this on the code side, but we can't deploy it and we can't support it, right? So that's the tricky part here. Okay, there's a link in here to the executable that can be basically downloaded, some guidance. We're going to go through kind of how it works from a VITA standpoint. I will say on Apple laptops, it is much more straightforward. I know there's at least a portion of our user community, I think at the universities especially, that do use Apple laptops. On Apple laptops, Okta FastPass can just be grabbed from the Apple App Store. It is an easy setup, okay? But a little bit more tricky from a Windows standpoint. After you see this demonstration and after you've gone to talk and think about whether you want to learn more and possibly consider rolling out Okta FastPass, we are asking you to put in a ticket through the standard mechanism, right? Cardinal in the subject line, email to bcc@vita.virginia.gov by a week from Friday. That basically says, yes, we're interested in learning more about FastPass. And between Luis and the Cardinal team, we're going to give you guidance. But again, we can't do it. We can't actually manage it for you, but we can point you in the right direction. The last point on here, we're still working through this a little bit, but for a user, a new user who comes into Cardinal or a new hire who is going to use FastPass, there will be a few changes to the current registration process. That will be communicated. It's all technically possible to do it this way, but there are a few caveats to the current process. More to follow on that. I'm not going into the nuances of that today. Okay, so now I'm going to demonstrate FastPass and how it's going to work in the production environment after the 7th and the 8th when we get this new code migrated. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to, I'm going to sign out of this browser. Bear with me. Okay, so again, you remember that my MFA options right now, I've set up my iPhone for Okta Verify. I set up Google Authenticator a couple of times, right? I did Google Authenticator itself first, and then I did Duo. I still have SMS for this purpose of this discussion. Okay. When you set up FastPass, you're not setting it up from this screen. Okay. Instead, again, I'm on a COV laptop. So back in September, August of last year, VITA rolled out, right? So deployed behind the scenes. Everyone got FastPass. Okay. So right now I already have FastPass on my laptop. So I'm basically going to open it. It gets confusing again. It says Okta Verify, but basically Okta Verify on the desktop is called FastPass. Okay. I want to remove one. Bear with me for a second. Okay, so I'm going to do this fresh from the start. Again, no one's expecting to take screenshots of this. This is all coming in Java 8 and whatnot, right? But I'm basically launching Okta FastPass. Again, think about if Virginia Tech or Quartz wants to roll out FastPass in some fashion, this will get rolled out. You will roll this out to your user group, and then they'll have the application on their devices. Okay, and then instructions are going to have to say launch the application. And it's going to say create an account. And basically, you're connecting Okta FastPass to the specific Okta URL that VITA and Cardinal uses, virginia.okta.com. I have to authenticate myself, right? I got to give my password and whatnot. In this case, I'm going to use Google Authenticator to do my multi-factor because it's just easier.
Actually, Duo.
Sorry. Thanks, Dinesh. Sorry. Bear with me for a second. Okay, so I'm going to use another account. And I'm going to log in with what we call our PPS accounts. Okay, so the way VITA has rolled this out, and I believe this is somewhat of a judgment call on how they wanted to roll this out. So basically, when VITA rolled this out, and this could be the guide for other organizations as well, VITA is requiring an 8-character password, which can be numbers, can be letters, to be entered. Okay, this is not like a traditional network password that's going to expire over time. Okay. So we actually had some users when they rolled out to FastPass, they made it the same as their network credentials. That really doesn't make sense because it can get really confusing when network credentials expire. So basically, it's more like almost like your bank PIN or something to that effect. So I entered what I'm going to be using for my passcode. I'm going to set it as the default. I actually use FastPass all the time now because I'd rather not deal with my smartphone for MFA. Okay. So now I have set up FastPass as well. So now if I go back and refresh the screen, I'm under Okta Verify. Again, Okta Verify both means the mobile app and the desktop app. So under Okta Verify, I've got my iPhone, and then I have my asset tag. That's my Cove laptop. Okay. In essence, I have FastPass now working. Okay. So now let's actually use it to get into Cardinal. Again, this is what works in non-prod now. Will work in prod after the 7th and the 8th. So same deal, enter a username and password. I'm going to say verify with something else. Basically, it's going to know what you last verified with. So in this case, I started with just SMS and I put all these other stuff here, right? So I'm going to use Okta FastPass. And now in this case, again, if I have the app deployed and I have it configured now, it's just going to pop up this nice little screen. And that passcode that I entered, set up just a couple minutes ago, I'm now going to enter. Again, this is for the user who doesn't have a smartphone or doesn't want to use a smartphone. And I'm able to get into Cardinal. So again, that is FastPass. We know that there will need to be some internal discussions that your IT group, you're going to need to have, right? I think Luis would tell you that the deployment is not terribly complex, but there needs to be some things thought about. But again, it's a really nice solution for either for your entire organization, or if you've got that handful of 10, 20, or 30 people who do not have a smartphone, who do not want to use a smartphone. Okay, let's see if there's questions related to Okta FastPass.
It looks like Joby has his hand up.
Yeah, so
Hey, yep.
quick question. I posted it in chat. When you established your account in FastPass after you had installed it and you were registering with your official COV email, you
Yes.
used Google Authenticator to MFA initially into Okta FastPass. The whole use case for our organization for Okta FastPass is because users refuse to use their own personal cell phone or don't have one. How are they supposed to establish that account if they don't have access to something like Google Authenticator?
Okay, so in the immediate term, until SMS goes away, SMS can be used as, so I could have selected just then SMS as my multi-factor method that would allow me to get FastPass set up. So let me just, so whenever I set up a new multi-factor, it's asked, I can use any of my existing factors. So take your example, the person who doesn't have a smartphone today, if you a decision made to get FastPass on their desktop, they can, instead of using Google Authenticator, they would use SMS as their MFA method to validate themselves, and then that would allow them to set up FastPass. And then from that point forward, they don't need to use SMS ever again.
Okay, but now let's fast forward a year when you've disabled SMS. I have a new judge coming on board who doesn't use cell phones. Now so SMS is no longer an option.
If when a user has no MFA options, so if I cleared out all my MFA options right now, or for a new user who's just creating their Cardinal account, because they don't have any MFA options, it will allow them to set up their, long story short, FastPass can be set up when you don't have any MFA options without having, for a new user in that case. The process is going to change a little bit. It's kind of my bullet point at the bottom here. There'll be some adjustments required for the Cardinal registration process for users who set up Okta FastPass as their MFA option. But the heart of it is they do not have to have a smartphone to set that up, Jody.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yep.
I think we're good on questions.
Okay. The last thing we're going to talk about in terms of demonstrations is UB keys. Our hope is that this is a last resort for people, because FastPass really works very well, and there's some significant complexities in how we can use UB keys with Cardinal logins. And to be honest, we're still working a little bit of this through. But it goes back a little bit to Jody's question a few minutes ago. So again, UB keys, I have one on my laptop right now, and you're not going to see it because we got that pretty picture there, but it is a hardware-based mechanism, right? And some people like it and so forth. So again, no smartphone required, okay? But in order to use a UB key to set up initially for Cardinal, we actually have to blank out all the MFA options for the user. So what I'm going to do, because I do have admin rights, I'm actually going to go on my normal account into Okta. So remember, right now, my PPS account has all this stuff, right? I got Okta Verify, I've got phone, I've got Google Authenticator. Okay. I'm going to log in with my other account. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I think FastPass is a really nice option for a lot of people. I prefer it over. I mean, this is how I set it up for just everything I do at this point. I think some groups will really want to consider this. I'm going to go into the admin tool. I'm going to pull up what we call our PPS accounts. And this kind of goes back to what Jody's question as well. So I'm actually going to reset my authenticators for this other account. I'm going to keep my security questions, but I'm going to get rid of text. I'm going to get rid of Okta Verify, both on my phone and my desktop, and I'm getting rid of Google Authenticator. I'm going to hit reset. Okay. So that means that when I now go into Cardinal, okay, log into Cardinal, okay, so I'm going to actually go back to Jody's question for a second. So at this point, okay, if a user isn't new, okay, normally this is what they see. They're saying set up Google Authenticator, set up Verify, because they don't have any MFA options. Security methods help retire. You got to do it. For your use case, Jody, we're going to tell people, skip this. Don't do it here, okay? We're going to say instead, launch Okta Verify, and then set it up the way I just talked about, okay? So that's how, for a new user who never has a smartphone and wants to use FastPass, it's going to work. But that's not really what I'm demonstrating right now. I'm going to demonstrate UB keys instead. So UB keys show up under security keys or biometric authenticators. So again, I have my UB key plugged into my USB-C drive or slot. You will be prompted to register a security key. Okay. I'm going to have a select security key. There are other options there, by the way. You can do this to an iPad. There are other options there, but I'm going to use the physical security key. I'm going to click next. I'm going to click OK. Security keys are specific to a URL. So in production, it will say mycardinal.virginia.gov. That is significant. I'm not setting up for Virginia.okta.gov. That is part of the limitation I was referring to. But I'm going to set it up for our production mirror environment. I'm going to create a key. I'm going to touch my security key that's attached to my computer. And now it says I can use my security key to get in. I'm going to hit continue. And I'm logged into Cardinal. So again, we would hope and think this is a niche use case. We would recommend FastPass, but a situation, there may be some where security keys all are the only options. They will work, but what I have in italics is the key statement. At this point, we're still thinking about workarounds, but at this point, if you set up a security key to get into Cardinal and you are trying to use other VITA Okta applications, we do not, at the moment, have a working solution for that. We're still thinking about options. So I see a question about a duo key. I don't know what a duo key is. Is that another hardware type key, Brenna?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that question if it's the one that just generates the code on the key itself versus they actually have a, do they have a USB key? I hadn't seen that. So
Yes, it does just generate the code itself. Correct. It does not plug
okay,
into
so
the device.
all right, hardware tokens that generate a code is a different methodology than what we're using with the YubiKeys. With YubiKeys, we're using FIDO2, so it's a self-enrollment process.
Gotcha.
With the Duo security keys, that's there's a seed file that would have to be generated or provided in order for that to be ingested into the system. It's a lot more complex, and it's not something we currently support on the Okta side. You'd have to look
Okay.
into that a little bit more, but yeah.
Okay, we have other options. We just already used that, so it just seemed easier for us, but it doesn't sound easy right now. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
We're at 3:56. We do have this session for the next 30 minutes for those who want to stay on. Okay, so we're done with our demonstrations. The changes that we are migrating on our side to support the Okta FastPass and security keys. Again, we're targeting the week of 3.7 and 3.8. We're done with our technical testing, but we are having a ton of job aid updates and user help documentation updates that we're making. We do want to make sure 90% of that is done, as well as appropriate communications. And you guys know about our Cardinal message board updates. We need all of that to be done prior to the code changes going to production, because again, users will see this. Okay, so we're hoping for 3.7 and 3.8. Again, we really want to make that date because we know that, again, at the early April is when SMS will be removed. So of course, the earlier we get the additional options out there, the better. Okay. I may have said this earlier, we have about 15,000 people who currently are using Okta Verify from the non-COV population. We're going to continue to look at those numbers, including Google Authenticator, and then when organizations consider other options. Again, FastPass. The key message takeaway here, it may be a nice solution for your desktops. We can offer guidance. We will offer guidance. Please submit a ticket to BCCC with Cardinal FastPass in the subject line by March 6th. And then the combination of Luis's team and Cardinal will try to walk you and guide you through that process as much as possible. But again, it is a decision on your side. Do you want to support that long-term versus relying on the smartphone apps? We are doing a second support session next Tuesday. You're welcome to attend again. You're welcome to encourage other members of your staff and teams to attend. We are going to go back after this call to make sure that look at who came today. We're looking very hard to see if we're missing significant groups within Cardinal, because we, of course, want this to be as least impacting to the user community as possible.
Joby had another question.
Okay, Jody. Yep, go for it.
All right, so again, this is Joby here. Thanks for paying attention to the hands being up.
Sure.
I guess my main question was, and I think it was clear, but I just want to clarify here, is that if we as an organization, so as the judicial branch, if we roll this out to every judge, every clerk and every court in the state, it is on us to fully support FastPass, right? We can't tell them, hey, if you have a question about FastPass, open a ticket with Cardinal. Is that accurate?
We will try our best always to support our users, right? So we will, if a user is trying to get a timesheet in and is having problems, we will do our best to help them, right? Let me just give the example, Jody. So if FastPass won't launch for some reason, like the app is broken on their desktop, we can't fix that, right? But we would still respond to it, and hopefully with your guidance, we can help route to the right person within the judicial branch to take a look at their desktop to see what's going on. So does that make sense?
It does. So, but let's say the app is functional. It starts when they try to, but they're still having problems.
Yeah, I mean, so like we might, for instance, that might be, hey, the app needs to be uninstalled and reinstalled, right? We would try to encourage them, and we would connect if possible to the right group within, but we wouldn't be able to like jump on their PC and reinstall it, right?
Obviously. Yeah.
I think all that being said, and I think this is a completely honest and transparent statement. I mean, we've got 40,000 COVE users that are using FastPass, and it's been pretty smooth so far. So it's not like an app that breaks all the time and whatnot. Luis, any additional feedback you'd like to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a limitation on how much support we can actually provide, to be fair. There are some unique configurations depending on your environment. That's all in the documentation regarding the installation process, which you can find on the VITA website. For example, if you have SSL inspection in your environment, not everybody does, but the larger organizations do. So Okta FastPass, it's using a phishing resistant methodology, which means it does not allow anything to intercept the traffic, aka proxy trying to do SSL inspection, right? And so therefore it typically has to be whitelisted and bypassed for the URL of it going to Okta, right? So that way it can pass through and it knows it hasn't been manipulated in any way. It's the built-in security. It sounds like you have to reduce the security aspect in your environment, but it's because it is detecting that, and it's intended to be phishing resistant.
And that's essentially what we, like Jody, we assume that the judicial branch may be interested in this. So we definitely, please put the ticket in, and then those details we'll work through. And if we have like 3 organizations who's very interested, we may combine the group and have a very detailed FastPass conversation going on the details of what Luis is talking about.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else in the chat, Ryan?
Not so far, no.
Any other questions from this group? Again, the deck will be sent out. We have recorded this. We're trying to think if we're not sure quite what we're doing with the recording yet, but we wanted to make sure we had it in case we need it. Any other questions? Again, at all times, the best way to get support from Cardinal, if you have questions after receiving this deck, as always, please enter a ticket with Cardinal in the subject line to VCCC that will route to us.
Just checking in to see if it's okay if I just drop the URL that I know you had on the slides, which they'll get the slides later. But if they want to get to the resources that are on the VITA website related to what we're discussing here, I'm going to drop that in the chat.
Absolutely. Thanks, Louise.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today. I realize we went through a lot of things fairly quickly. Again, our entire goal is to make this as painless for the user community as possible. We recognize this is a hard change. We recognize we have open enrollment right around the corner. So we're going to do our best to get through it. And like I said, as always, when tickets come in, even if it is a little bit out of our core area, we will try to help. But hopefully a year from now, this will be a lot smoother and folks will be comfortable with the new methods. Thank you again.